Welcome back, guys. NBA previews. This time we're doing the Western Conference champions of last year, Dallas Mavericks, with my main man, Matt Hanifan. Matt, how we doing, my brother?
I'm doing good, man. Just less than a month until the season starts. I'm ready for some hoops, man. I mean, at least we're recording this on September 27th, so yeah,
Yeah.
less than a month away. Um,
Isn't
Training
preseason
camp
next week?
starts next week.
Yep.
Media days next week. Like, I'm ready for some hoops, man. Can we just fast forward to it already?
It just seems like basketball is just not necessarily a universal, but it's year round, because you got
Yeah.
like the Olympics, you have like summer league, and you got all those aspects of the NBA. It's like such a global game now. It's like I feel like there's not really an off season, but like you're getting ready back to NBA
Yeah.
basketball. I hear you, but
There's like a dead point in like the August September period, and a lot of that for me is like, all right, football. Like football's coming back. I love football. Obviously, baseball season's wrapping up. Postseason's in
yeah,
October, um, and all that stuff. But like right around this time, I'm like, all right, now I just want some basketball. Like,
yeah.
give me some basketball. Like the Olympics did a great job of giving me that, for lack of a better word, high for a couple weeks.
Yeah,
But now it's like I'm hungry again. Like, give me
I we
give
can
me some
talk about
hoops.
your Yankees a different day, but no, we got to talk about the
I'm
Dallas.
just kidding.
What we could talk about the Dallas Mavericks. I want look before we kind of dive into what Dallas can go, like how Dallas is looking going into the season with like their signings and acquisitions and whatnot. I want to talk about how they were last season and like the fact that they even made the finals. Like I wanted to get like your thoughts and opinions of how that Dallas team, like how they went about achieving what they achieved and how you feel like they did.
I mean, I didn't expect them to make the finals, especially like midway through the season. They were, I want to like round 45, 50 games in, they were hovering around 500. And it was one of those things where it's like, all right, is Dallas going to actually turn it around? And then all of a sudden, boom, they get PJ Washington. Derek Lively obviously ascends into one of the better rookie centers that we've had. They got Daniel Gafford at the deadline. Um, Obviously, Derek Jones Jr. toward later in the season, turns into something. Like, and that was a guy that had signed for the minimum, like guy who was betting on himself. And obviously, he has one of the best seasons, maybe the best season of his career. Um, and just like the fact that the thing that stood out to me, obviously, was like the last like month ish of the season, they were like one of the best defenses, if not the best defense in the entire league. And a lot of that was, you know, Josh Green. A lot of that was Derek Jones Jr., like really at the point of attack. Then obviously you have all that size that you got at the deadline. And you were able to stymie teams, and you were able to, like, they became a really good, obviously, like shot blocking team. And they were just a really like well connected, oiled machine. In addition to Kyrie, in addition to Luka Doncic, like they weren't the most efficient offense at that point, but they didn't need to be. And then once the playoffs came, you beat the Clippers in 6 games. You beat the Thunder in 6 games. The Thunder, by the way, the number one seed in the West. Even though that entire race last year between them, Denver and Minnesota, was crazy. And then they obviously beat a Minnesota team who I think just ran out of gas a little bit and had really poor performances from Ant and Cat in that Western Conference Finals. And then ultimately they got steamrolled by your Celtics in the finals. But I didn't expect them to get to this point, but really after the deadline, and especially once March hit, like they started to click on both ends of the floor, at least in a way to where you're like, okay, there's something actually here, as opposed to what we saw at that point 2 seasons ago when after they get Kyrie and then all of a sudden later in the season they begin to crater. Um, yeah.
I I I love the fact that you brought up my Celtics and I didn't have to, but I'm not obviously I'm not
Listen, I
gonna
didn't want to.
I know you didn't, but
I definitely did not want to.
oh my goodness. But I do love the fact that you brought up like just the fact that like they kind of saw what they kind of needed going into the second half of the year. It kind of reminded me of the Celtics the year before where like well not the year before, but in 2022 where they get Derek White at the deadline and they bring guys in and they kind of start galvanizing the troops a little bit in the second half of the year and they start going on a little bit of a run. Obviously the like to your point when it came to the offense, like you have Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, some of the best shot creating players in the NBA. Obviously it seems like in the finals. It just that like going up against that Celtic defense, it just like something like that just wasn't going to work. You can see that Kyrie didn't play how he was supposed to. Luka didn't play how he was supposed to, and it just ballooned. And everybody's saying like, oh, it was a series that. Even though everybody said they had Dallas winning, putting it in practice, you saw what happened. So,
for the record, I did have Boston winning that series.
Yeah, see, at least
I had Boston in 6.
Hey, at least you're one of the
memory
smart.
serves, I want to say it was Boston in 6. I'd have to go back and look and see where I made those.
I would have to look back.
I did have Boston winning that series, begrudgingly.
I appreciate it anyway. I'll take the compliment. But no, but yeah, the fact that they got guys like bringing in Gafford and really like utilizing Lively as like kind of those like I guess for lack of a better way to describe them as like those lob city bigs for like Luka to be able to have that lob threat, or kind of like Clint Capella to Luka's James Harden, if you will, when it came to like those old Rocket teams, like just giving him and Kyrie like just lob threats to make it like they were wrecking havoc. Like you saw Gafford have a bunch of like big time dunks with like Gobert, especially in the latter half of that series. And even talking about that Minnesota series, like to your point, it's like Anthony Edwards, it seems like he wanted to kind of show that he was like that two-way superstar, but trying to guard Kyrie or Luka for the entirety of the game and trying to like put 25 to 30 points on the other end because your team needs it. It's like that's the kind of thing that kind of puts your team in a tailspin. But to Dallas's credit, those guys really those are the types of players or types of teams, I should say, that really got hot at the right time. I would say even like your Miami Heat last year, like those guys got red hot during the postseason, and then obviously like brought them all the way to the final.
Game. I mean, are you talking 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Because I was like, it was only one. It was one game, and like
I was saying last year, like 2023, that season where like Caleb Martin, had his Reggie Miller impersonation, that whole thing. Yeah. But like kind of just like you can see the similarities there. They get hot, and then it's like, oh, how's anybody going to beat this team? So yeah, I think Dallas overall had a great season, even if a lot of people may not have thought that they may have gotten there. But at the same time, it just seems like Dallas has kind of found what pretty much they found what works. So it makes it very interesting going into the next season and following seasons. Now bringing in guys like Clay and some of these other guys that we mentioned, and obviously losing some of that athleticism, like Derrick Jones Jr. To your point on him, he was like I think he had his best shooting season, even though he was more of like an athletic guy. Obviously former slam dunk champion, but yeah, I think the most important thing was the fact that he was able to find that jumper, especially during the playoffs, to kind of add more spacing to that Dallas offense. And then obviously, what Luka and Kyrie are going to give you. But I think just fleshing out the rest of the roster because you kind of have that core that can prove that they can make it to an NBA Finals now.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with. And the thing with Derrick Jones was like him at the point of attack defensively, like he was always picking up dudes 3/4 court, and he was always taking the toughest assignment, and he was doing a good job with that. And that was not something that he showed consistently throughout his career. Like you could tell just because of the length, the athleticism, and whatnot, like that he had the potential, but that was something that he did, and he took the challenge head on throughout the postseason. And when you have a kind of a guy like him taking on that challenge to ease pressure, I mean, not to say that Luka and Kyrie are good defenders because they're not. I mean, Kyrie showed glimpses of it. Even Luka sometimes on like possession by possession can show glimpses of it, but it's not consistent because of the role that they have offensively. And when you have a guy that is able to take that burden off them and take that pressure off them, it just helps the rest of the defense. In addition to having Gafford behind you, in addition to having Derek Lively behind you for 20 minutes a night, in addition to having PJ Washington behind you. Like it just helps out everyone a lot when you have that guy who's willing to take that on, kind of wreak that havoc and make things a little bit difficult. And when you have a guy like that, teams aren't able to start their offense with 18 seconds left on the shot clock. They start it with 14, 13. That limits the amount of actions, that limits the amount of open opportunities an offense can have on a given possession, and that matters a lot.
Okay, it's good that you mentioned guys like PJ Watt. It's like I just like how they went about building the roster with those guys. Obviously, with trades with Charlotte and Washington, I want to look forward like more towards the upcoming season now. Like the fact that they lost somebody like Derrick Jones Jr. and they brought in somebody like Clay, even though he's in his 30s now. I want to ask you just about like that move, or even some other offseason moves that you think are notable for this Dallas team. But like, I want to ask you, like, do you feel like bringing in Clay, like, how much of an upgrade is it for this Dallas Maverick team?
I think Clay helps with I mean, obviously he helps with the shooting, the standstill shooting. Like, he gives them another threat who can knock down threes at a more consistent rate than a guy like Derrick Jones Jr. But the guy that I'm looking toward replacing him in that way is Najee Marshall. I don't want to say it was Najee Marshall. It was like 3 for 27. Like, it was a pretty team friendly deal. He's a solid 3-point shooter. He's a little underrated defensively. Like, I don't think he's gonna be like the Derrick Jones Jr. like how good he was, but I think he's close. And I think so. Those two moves together, they kind of help mitigate that loss a little bit. Again, I think all three of those guys are different players. Obviously, Clay is in a different stratosphere. He's one of the best shooters of all time. So it's like that's what you're getting. But he has lost a little juice defensively, and it makes for an interesting conversation once the season starts of like, okay, who's going to be closing? Is it going to be Kyrie, Luka, and Clay? Because if it's those three guys, you're really compromising your defense. And then who are you going to have? Who's the other two bodies that you're going to have around them? But then again, for what those guys provide offensively, it also may not matter on some nights. And so that's where it's like, I'm guessing it's going to be fluid in that way. Obviously, Luka and Kyrie are going to be closing games, but just I wonder who those other three guys will be. Is it going to be Najee closing over Clay some nights? Is it like who exactly is it going to be? And that's just the question that I have with the Clay thing. I mean, I think it was 3 for 50 sign and trade. Like, it's fine. They did trade Josh Green in a second round pick. Like, that's reasonable, I guess, even though Clay's at the latter stage of his career. And there was a point in time last season where he was shooting really poorly, but then he got really, really, really hot.
Yeah.
And I just think he helps obviously space that offense even more so than it already was, and it helps. It really helps their bigs too. It helps a guy like Derek Lively. It helps a guy like Daniel Gafford, guys who aren't traditional floor spacers. Because if you do have a Klay Thompson on the strong side or the weak side, you can't help off that. And so it makes those guys' life easier on rolls and whatnot, and for the vertical spacing, and then it makes lives easier, obviously, for Kyrie and Luka, who are two of the best. To your point earlier, two of the best shot creators in the entire world.
Didn't Lively hit a 3 in the finals?
If he did, I don't remember it because
I think David Tillman hit one, but I think Derek Lively hit a 3, so you could call him a stretch. You know? Oh my god! But going to the Clay thing, honestly, I think going into Dallas and like a team that's obviously like has like a championship window with like obviously with Kyrie and Luka. Like obviously Luka's still very young. He's still in his mid-20s. And then you have Kyrie who's just entering his 30s. I think he's going to be 32, 33 over the course of the season. But the thing with Clay is that I feel the way like Clay's play style, you look at him when you see Klay Thompson, you think of a guy who's going to get open off of screens and getting into those actions and getting wide open threes in the corner or off the wing and whatnot, because there's so much attention surrounding Kyrie and Luka. And even Kyrie's I feel like he's a good catch and shoot player a little bit. Obviously, that's not really like he doesn't get as many opportunities I think we might think, or maybe a little bit more because now he's playing with Luka. But but the fact with Clay is that Clay doesn't need to have the ball as much as Kyrie and Luka do.
Right.
So like I feel like this is a guy who scored 60 points on like 3 dribbles, bro. It's like I think if all he really has to worry about on the offensive end is really just moving without the ball and getting wide open threes, or just in catch and shoot situations, you can just have him. We'll just worry about that on offense and then like kind of have him hone in. I'm not saying Clay needs to be your primary defender anymore. Like obviously that's not. I don't think that's his body as like even as much as like 2, 3, 4 years ago now. So. But I feel like Clay is going to fit so well next to these guys. And at least, even if he's not putting up 20 points a game, this is a guy who can, like, you know, can shoot 38+% from 3. And I don't know, maybe on like 5, 6 attempts a game, probably more. I don't know. I'm just throwing out numbers here. But I feel like the fact that he's with like 2 guys who command so much attention, it's going to allow him to seamlessly like just fit into that offense. And we might see a little bit of a resurgence out of him. Going with it, like pretty much, I feel like a change of scenery and like just like the new weapons he has at his disposal is probably going to help him out a bunch.
See. I'm curious to see like when he signed there, because that's not an offense, at least in my head, that there's a lot of movement, like player movement. And I don't know if that's just because of the personnel that they have, or if that's just how they. Because I mean, it feels like, I mean, maybe this is kind of heliocentric basketball, but it feels like when Luka has the ball, maybe when Kyrie's on the floor, or when it's not, it's just four guys standing around. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of pick and rolls and stuff involved with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Three guys on the perimeter standing around. I wonder how much they're going to ask Clay to move at this stage. And I mean, I still think he can have a restart because again, those guys command so much attention. Some idiot is going to play off him or whatever, and he's going to knock down 3, 4, 5 threes on a given night.
Yeah.
But other than that, like I'm interested to see how much he actually moves in this kind of context because obviously Golden State what Kerr implemented there is different than really most NBA teams. Not a lot of NBA teams can replicate that, but at the same time, not a lot of NBA teams have the personnel to replicate that. And that becomes so it's a little bit different in that way. And I wonder how much Kid is going to adjust that scale from one way or the other.
I can imagine that they could try to utilize him. I'm not saying like it's going to be like just like side by side comparison, but they could probably try to implement him the same way like Ray Allen was for the Celtics when he was starting to get older, and kind of how he was with Miami when he went to the Heat, and just that guy who's just going to be like they'll run a couple of plays for him, and that's the times where he's moving off, like just moving to guy and get to his spot and be able to get that quick jump shot off for the threes, So, and I'm looking at it from a point of view that he's really going to be primarily looked at as the team's sharpshooter, and that's like entirely what his offense is going to be. And like, and to your point, like especially somebody who watched a bulk of those Dallas Maverick games, and even in the finals, like yeah, Kyrie and Luka, or mainly it was Luka. Luka would try to get the switch onto the big man and try to do his work there. Obviously, like he did go bare dirty, and then he in the Celtic series in the finals, he was always having Xavier Tillman guard him, always had Al Horford on him, and I think even at times with Porzingis when he did play, there would be those kinds of switches sometimes, but yeah, maybe I would like to think it would add a new wrinkle to the Mavericks offense and kind of unlock something a little bit more if they can try to implement Clay the way I feel like they would be able to kind of add more movement to kind of like address kind of like that concern you have.
Yeah. Another guy that I want to point out here who can add some obviously some 3D spark is Quentin Grimes. They traded for him from Detroit. He got traded to Detroit at the deadline. They traded, I think it was Tim Hardaway and like 3 second-round picks, 3 future second-round picks, something like that. And obviously second-round picks, I mean, teams are just throwing them away and swapping them all over the place.
Like candy.
There's probably been second-round picks around the league that have been traded like 3, 4, 5 different times in the span of a year or two, because that's just the currency, I guess. Instead of having a first-round pick or a pick swap, unless you're San Antonio, like you're going to be trading second-round picks. So that was what they did. But he was another I don't remember exactly what the injury was. I want to say it was like a shoulder injury, but his last year was a pretty injury-riddled season for him. I know he was bumped out of the rotation a little bit in New York, because they signed Dante and whatnot. And like, I don't know. I think like that's a good buy low, because I mean he was around 38, 39% his first 2 years. He's still on his rookie contract. Like he can definitely be a guy that can come in and like he's also a very nosy, like very hard-nosed defender, like a guy who's going to give a shit on the defensive end of the floor, even though he's, I think, 6'5", 6'6", something like that. And he's another guy, again, who can rise up and knock down a few shots. And I just wonder what his role is going to be like now that Josh Green isn't there. Like, that's, I think, a great Josh Green replacement if you're just getting him on kind of like this buy low move, even though you are trading second-round picks. And Tim Hardaway Jr., who is at the latter stages of his career, like, I don't know. That's another guy that I think can make some sort of an impact in the rotation. Maybe not right away, but I think at some point during the season.
Okay. I know we're kind of getting close to time. I want to ask you this. The Dallas Mavericks last year went 50-32 to end the season. Do you think they're going to be over or under 50 wins this season with everything we talked about, bringing in Clay, Najee Marshall, you mentioned, Quentin Grimes, you just mentioned, and kind of like how we were talking about the offense and kind of like just bringing it all home? I want to ask you, do you think they're going to be over or under 50 wins this year?
See, this is where you're getting the degenerate portion of the show out of me. One of the bets that I did make eons ago, right around when the win totals came out, was Dallas under 49.5. I don't think they're going to get to 50, only because like one, I think Oklahoma City's better. Not to say Denver's better, but I do think Memphis will have. Obviously, that was a season from hell last year with all the injuries that they had. I think they'll be a middle tier team in the West. I think Golden State's better. I think Phoenix is better. And so just by that, and considering it was such a like late season run for them, I don't know how many moves they can make at the deadline and whatnot. Maybe I'm wrong. But it feels like unless if someone emerges or whatnot, I don't know I also don't know what this team's draft capital situation looks like. I have to look that up. But I think they're like a middle tier team in the West. I just think it's going to be so competitive again to where I don't think they get to 50. I think they get it right around it. Like I think they probably finish around 47, 48, 49 wins. I just don't think they quite get to 50. I don't, again, when I say I bet them under 49.5, I don't feel as good about it now as I did then. Just
Okay.
thought process. Don't do what I do, but I made a lot of win total bets. It's bad. But that was one of them that I did make.
Hey.
So
I don't hate that argument for you. I think for them, it's like pretty much everything we talked about them going into the season, what worked for them to get to the point through the NBA Finals. I think for them, I think they may be a shell under 50 wins. You may be right about that. And that's not even a knock against the team, because obviously they made moves and they made not necessarily reactionary to make it sound bad, but they made moves to acknowledge some of the things that they needed to work on. They needed to get better shooting. They needed to probably bring in maybe a little bit more star power when it came to Clay, and kind of just shift the roster just a little bit. But I feel for them, no matter where they fall in the seedings, these guys are going to be a tough out in the playoffs. Like, until I see a team beat them, like, that's the team you got to worry about going into the Western Conference playoffs next spring. So even if they're even if they're a little bit under 50 wins, that really doesn't matter. It seems like the West is just just becomes a bloodbath whenever springtime rolls around anyway.
Yeah, I have them as the 5 seed, just for anyone wondering. And again, I think they're like there's a wide range of outcomes for these teams in the West. I'm confident in who the 1 seed will be. I think the 1 seed's Oklahoma City. Outside of that, you told me Dallas is a 2 seed.
I'd believe it.
I'd believe it. If you also told me they were the 6 or 7 seed, like they were in a play-in game, I'd also believe that too. Like I just don't. There's a wide range of outcomes, and that's not just with them; it's with all of these teams. I'm looking at no free ads, but FanDuel does have Dallas still at 49.5 wins. A little juice toward the over, but again, I just think the rest of the West is not rest of the West. I mean, obviously, I don't know if Denver's going to be as good just with the loss of KCP. Minnesota may not be as good just coming off of that entire year. They lost a couple of pieces like Kyle Anderson. But I do think teams like Memphis, Golden State, Phoenix. I'm not as high on New Orleans as I think most people are, but I still think, like, obviously you got DeJounte Murray in the building now. Houston, I think, is going to be better. I actually think Reed Shepherd might win Rookie of the Year. But like I think some of those teams are better, and I just think it's going to even out the win totals just a little bit more in that conference, outside of maybe Oklahoma City, who I just think is, to me, I think they're like heads and shoulders better than everyone else just from a regular season's perspective. Maybe when it comes time for the postseason, I think it evens out when you have like Nikola Jokic and whatnot. But again, this is also assuming all these teams stay healthy, because that also matters a lot. But
to your guess about them finishing 5th in the West, that's exactly where they seeded last year. So it seems like this, like the improve, like they may improve, but probably just like by how much. I think for them, the more important thing is to see how they do in the playoffs, of course. But
yeah, I think that's what they want too. Like I just think they want to get to like some of there's some teams that, not that they don't take it seriously enough in the regular season, but they just want to get to April and May healthy. And I think Dallas is exactly one of those teams. They just want to get there healthy and together, and once you get there, then you just see what goes on from there. But In
looks
this
like
competitive conference, I just don't see many teams getting to 50 wins outside of a few.
I mean, yeah, hey, the West is just like why outside of the one seed, it seems like the West, like 2 through those 10 seeds are going to be just like fisticuffs, so you like absolute melee. But pretty much we got to just wait and see just a little bit longer, a few more weeks, and the NBA season will be underway. So that's Dallas Mavericks season preview. If you guys have any questions, if you guys have like anything you want to chime in, please let us know. And obviously be sure to keep it here on Vendetta Sports Media because we're covering all 30 NBA teams before the season starts. So until next time, we'll see you guys.